This is the ROS Developers Podcast, episode 42.
The ROS Developers Podcast. The ROS Developers. The ROS Developers Podcast. The ROS Developers.
Hello, ROS developers, and welcome to the ROS Developers Podcast, the podcast that gives you insights from the experts about how to program your robots with ROS. And this is Ricardo here speaking from the Construct. And today I would like to dedicate the podcast to all those ROS developers of the world. Are you creating ROS programs? Are you building robots based on ROS? Are you creating companies and products based on ROS? Then this is the podcast, and this is the podcast dedicated to you. So you are growing this amazing system that helps us so much in the development of the robotics field. And today I'm very honored to introduce you to Tully Foote. Tully is the man behind the ROS maintenance at the Open Source Robotics Foundation. How crazy it is. And of course, he is backed up with a team of ROS developers, some of which we have already interviewed here in this podcast, in previous episodes. But we can say that Tully is the manager of the ROS team. In Spanish, we would say that Tully is el que corta el bacalao. Welcome to the podcast, Tully.
Hi, Ricardo. Thank you for having me here.
It's our pleasure and our honor to have one person that is actually in charge of all that software that we are using every day here in our places. And in your LinkedIn title, it indicates that you are the ROS platform manager. What this title actually includes?
So, in my role as the ROS platform manager, I look to make sure that all aspects of ROS are there to make it the best platform for people to build on top of going to build their robotics applications. I look after ROS package development, ROS package maintenance, community outreach, infrastructure management, and whatever else we think will help make the ROS more useful to the community.
And are you in charge of developing the core of ROS, like all the code that is behind, for example, ROS core, or all the code that is possible for us to do the communication between the topics or the calls to the services? Are you in charge also of that?
I wouldn't say I'm in charge of that. We have a small team here. We work together mostly as a bunch of peers to make this all happen.
Okay, yeah, but I'm asking you that because from your previous answers, I understood that you were more in charge of the infrastructure of ROS, but not the code itself. So when we execute ROS core, there is that code that is there. So are you and your team also developing that specific core code?
Yes, our teams works on everything from the infrastructure, server maintenance, all the way down to the core middleware communication and everything.
Okay. And can you explain us how is the process for creating a new version of ROS? Because we are seeing that they are released a new distro. I would say so, because you corrected me previously. So instead of saying version of ROS, I'm going to say distro of ROS. So how do you decide what goes in a new distro on what remains from a previous one?
So we've modeled our process after the Ubuntu process, which is using a periodic sync that goes every so often, and then we will lay that timeline out ahead of time. And based on that timeline, we work with the community to put in the latest versions of every package that has come in and is available at the time of when we hit the deadline for the release. This allows us to have a standard timeline that everyone can prepare for and be ready for, so that people know what's coming and can be make their plans for their building their robot, building their application on top of it.
Okay, and so how do you organize this in the OSRF? So to create and maintain a ROS distro, what is the structure of? I don't know. So you mentioned that you are the ROS platform for manager, but then there is other members of your team. What is the structure of the team?
So we've been a small team. We've varied from 3 or 4 in the past, and now we've grown up to about 7 or 8. There are 3 types of work that we do. We do new development, we do package maintenance, and we do release management.
Okay.
There's other stuff in there as well that we do, but those are the 3 main things. And across the team, we distribute the package maintenance across the whole team so that each individual is responsible for some subset of the packages that we maintain. Similarly, new development is also distributed across the team, depending on who has time and expertise. They will work on new development there. And then for the release management, we all participate at some level, but we designate one person for each ROS release who's going to be in charge of maintaining the syncs, keeping track of all the packages in it, and coordinating the community around that specific release.
It's like the champion for that distro.
Yep. We've sometimes called it the ROS boss for that distro.
The ROS boss, okay. I like that name, the ROS boss. Yeah. Oh, do you have any T-shirt that says that? The ROS boss. I would like to have one like this.
Well, it takes a lot of work to earn that.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's why he deserves that title. That's super cool. And then when in that team is the quality assurance guy. For example, I know that Jose Luis Rivero is one of your the members of your team, but he is not in charge of neither on development, maintenance, or release. So how would this guy from quality assurance be integrated into that process?
So anyone on the team, the release manager's role is to gate what goes into the release and make sure that it's been through the necessary QA processes such that we can believe that it will work well. And so the release manager will work with everybody on the team, whether they're doing usually all the maintainers, to work with them to make sure that their package is ready to go for the release.
Okay.
And whoever's contributing they'll work with them to put it in.
Okay.
And this includes the people from the greater community. We have a small team here at Open Robotics, but the majority of the maintainers in the community are from the greater community and contribute. And it's the release manager who has to coordinate with all those maintainers to help make sure that we can get all the packages in.
Okay, and then if I have understood correctly, then everyone is in charge of having the quality assurance passed. So it's not that Jose Luis is in charge of all the packages. He is that right?
Right.
Okay, and
so every package has their own maintainer, and it's the maintainer's responsibility to release that package in a good condition.
Okay, and just one small Kit Kat here. You mentioned now Open Robotics. So should I call then Open Robotics instead of Open Source Robotics Foundation?
Yeah, so Open Robotics is now the brand, and that's how we would talk about ourselves. Okay. The Open Source Robotics Foundation still exists, and it also has a for-profit subsidiary, the Open Source Robotics Corporation. Mm-hmm. This is the same way that the Mozilla Foundation and Mozilla Corporation works. When you talk about them, you just talk about Mozilla. When we talk about ourselves, we talk about Open Robotics to refer to the project and the brand.
Okay, I understand now, finally, because I wrote an article last week, and I was mentioning that I didn't have it clear, this relation between, and some people send me information, hey, about this, about that, but I wanted to express now in the podcast, take also the opportunity to clarify for all the rest of the people of the audience that maybe don't have also clear that distinction. So from now on, it's Open Robotics. I got it.
We just use the shorter version, it's easier.
Yeah, exactly. It's even easier. Okay, close. KitKat, close. Let's continue with the questions about the ROS development. And I would like to know a little bit more about what is happening with the non-long-term distros, because I understand that they are not going to be released anymore, and so we'll have only one long-term support LTS distribution every 2 years. So what happened with this? Why that decision?
So what happened is we have been taking feedback from the community. In particular, we started out with in ROS 1 with a release cadence of every 6 months. And this was important because ROS was evolving very quickly when it was younger. And so every 6 months there was major changes coming out, major new features, etc. And everybody wanted the latest things. And so they would always be downloading the new version and jumping forward with us. As ROS has matured, the people are building larger, more complex systems on top of ROS, and they want more stability. And so they've been slowing down, and they don't usually jump to the new release because there aren't that many compelling features for them in that release. They're happy with what they have. And so as we've been watching the community, I remember back when we were starting, like the 6 month release cycle seemed really slow for a lot of our users. They always were chomping at the bit. They wanted the newer than the newest release. 6 months was way too old. And now what we've been seeing is that actually most people, we dropped back to an annual release cycle from 6 months based on user feedback. And we did some surveys, and you can find discussions online about that with the whole community. And we saw that people were like, oh, we want to slow down the development process and not have to iterate as quickly because we're building up a lot of infrastructure on top of this.
Okay.
And then recently we went back and revisited that discussion because we noticed that the downloads of ROS were heavily biased towards just the LTSs. And there was a very small percentage of people using the non-LTSs.
Yeah.
But making the release for an LTS and making the release for a non-LTS take about the same amount of work. And so we don't want to ask the community to do all this work if not many people are going to use it.
Yes.
And people are just going to use the LTSs. And so based on that feedback, we slowed it down and we said, well, we're only going to do the LTSs because that's what people are actually using and people want. And there's both effort from us to manage the releases, but every time we make a new distro, we're then also asking all of the package maintainers to maintain their package for that distro. And that's a lot of overhead and a lot of burden on the greater community, which is something that we don't want to ask of the community unless there is strong demand for it.
Okay, makes perfect sense. And yes, based on my experience also, in our case, we always use the long-term support version, and also, so we were for the products that we built, then we were using the long-term support because it's long-term support, and for a product that's very important. And then all the new things that you could have in the new release that is not LTS, then we could just wait for the to be included and debug it and better done on the next LTS. So that's why we skipped.
Yeah, and it's many people are making that same trade-off that you made, where you'd rather have the stability than the bleeding edge. And if you really need the bleeding edge, you can pull it in yourself, and it doesn't need to be in the distro.
Exactly. You can get to the Git and then get the package compiled, solve the problems, and that's it. Exactly. That's right. And
you'll notice also that we're on a similar higher frequency cadence with ROS 2 right now with 6 month releases. But going forward, as we go down the line, I suspect it will also slow down as we have more people building on top, and they will want more stability rather than innovation.
Yes, but makes perfect sense. Never heard that story before, so I didn't know why there's increase on this. So at the beginning, faster releases times and then slower. That's super interesting. I will put also one link on the notes of this program for accessing the surveys that you did in order to get that information from us, from the community. So I will put the results, of the survey.
Great.
And then what about the relation between the ROS release and the Ubuntu release? Is there any specific relation, or is it just by chance that because there is a new Ubuntu release, then we associate the next Ubuntu distro into that Ubuntu release? Or is there any reason, a specific reason?
Well, there's actually a pretty strong correlation, and we have specifically picked Ubuntu as the primary development platform because the Ubuntu team is doing a great job in building an awesome platform that we can leverage and build on top of. You'll note that our releases come out just after the Ubuntu releases because that lets us take advantage of their support cycle. It doesn't make a lot of sense for us to release a long-term support version of ROS on an Ubuntu version that's not long-term support. Because if the Ubuntu version goes out of support in 18 months, our 5-year support cycle is going to be not as valuable.
Exactly.
So we very specifically have chosen to follow the Ubuntu release shortly after they officially release, and then we make our release on top of that. Because the Ubuntu team and the underlying Debian team do a great job of getting all these packages together that we can then build on top and leverage their work.
Okay, makes perfect sense. Very good. And I finally understood also that question. That was something that was in my mind and I didn't really understand. But great. Then one question is about that. I have encountered many people there that are criticizing ROS, and one of the points that they say is that ROS, has a lot of packages that do many things, but most of them, many of them, let's say, they get dead at a certain ROS distro. So because nobody is maintaining, so something very cool is being created and for a specific distro, let's say Kinetic, but then it doesn't exist anymore in Melodic or the next ones. So why, in your opinion, why is this happening, and what do you propose as a solution for this?
So this is not unique to ROS. This is generally a software challenge, which is that, as I mentioned, it takes work to maintain and release packages and push them forward. The underlying systems will change and upgrade and evolve. And for every new release, somebody has to take time to go through and test and QA and validate that the software will continue to work. If there's a new version of Boost, you might have to change how you use the Boost interface. Or if there's, say, a new version of C++, you need to make sure that you've evolved and keep up with that. A lot of the work that goes into ROS is done by the maintainers and contributors of these packages. And if you see it with Ubuntu and Debian, they have orders of magnitude more maintainers than we do in ROS. And the general solution to this is we need more people to step up and consider contributing their time or supporting somebody else to make sure that these packages continue to be available going forward, because it takes work to make that happen. Yeah. And so if you're out there and you find a package that you've seen released in the past and you'd like to see in the future, consider thinking about, well, what can I do to make this happen? How can I contribute to make it happen? We have a bunch of community members that are doing their best to do this, but the amount of work out there is unlimited to make ROS as great as possible, and everyone needs to be able to be willing to step up and make it happen. It's free software. You can download it and use it for your purposes, but it takes work to put it there. Yes. So people need to be willing to do that work.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a call directly to you, to the people who are listening to this podcast. So in case that you have, I'm sure, because all of us, we have software already that we wanted to use this nice package that we wanted to use in the newest version of distro of ROS, but it was not available. And then we tweak it for our distro, for the new distro. So please consider pushing those changes and following the procedure for releasing those changes into the official version of ROS also. So that would be the way of doing it, isn't it? So making a call to the community for help.
Yeah, I mean, there's no specific call that we put out because this is an ongoing challenge. But we're always looking for new maintainers, people who will pick up orphan packages. It's natural that people who develop software They may have a change in their life. They may move on to a new projects and don't have time to maintain the work that they did previously. If it's something that's valuable, I encourage others to consider looking at that and picking it up if they think it's something that's valuable and they'd like to contribute.
Okay, okay. So there it is, the call for all the listeners. So let me see. So going on the same line, sometimes the people find the errors in a new release. So what can they do in order to help you and to you and your team on fixing that?
So if you find an issue with any package, the best thing you can do is, well, the first thing that we'd love you to do is file an issue or a ticket to let the developers know that you have a problem. Okay. A lot of people will complain, oh, this always happens, and if there's no ticket or issue filed, the developers won't know that this is an issue. Even better is if you have the technical means to go in and actually debug and find the problem, submit a pull request. That's always appreciated. It'll save time from the developer. It'll save you time to get the patch fixed upstream. And anyone else that would encounter that, we can merge it moderately quickly and get a release out. When you do file issues and tickets, the best thing you can do is make sure that they are complete and cover as much information, get as much information into the issue as you can so that we can reproduce it. Because the better the issue that you file, the more easy it is for us to reproduce, and then the easier it is for us to fix.
Okay.
So if you want to have the best response, the more information you can provide is better.
Okay. Yes, exactly. That's right. And then for the ticket, there is no specific location to issue a ticket, but the Git itself of that package. That would be the procedure.
The best place is the issue tracker for that package. Any package should have a wiki page, and on that wiki page there should be a link to the issue tracker so that you can find the right issue tracker for that package. If you don't know exactly what package to file it against, go ahead and take your best guess and file it with a nice detailed bug report. And if necessary, you may get bounced and say, oh, this isn't the right place. Over there is the right place. Please refile over there. But if you give a nice detailed issue, it should be relatively easy for the developers to redirect you to the right place. So.
Okay. And in the same line also, what about the documentation? So do you have to, for maintaining that and updating it, can the listeners help you in some way on that also?
Yes, definitely. We have a lot of documentation and we always hope to improve it. Any help would be greatly appreciated. It's all available online, usually either in the source code or in the wiki. This is all user editable. We'd love contributions that will help improve it. If you find something confusing, you can ticket it or propose a suggested change that would make it clearer once you figured it out. Many people don't think about documentation much, but it's a really critical part of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you that if you want to get involved, small changes in the documentation can often have a greater effect than small changes in the code, because a lot of people will read that documentation and make it clear. It can make it clearer to people down the line, and they can use the code in a better way.
Yeah. Well, about the documentation, for me, I have always said that one of the reasons that ROS was so successful in front of other frameworks that were quite similar to ROS, one of the points is the documentation. So I remember getting into ROS and then watching all those tutorials, all those exercises, all those examples there that were step by step, and that was very, very clear. That was a huge change from previous systems of previous documentations in other packages, in other frameworks. And so for me, I completely agree with you that it's very, very important to have that and to maintain. And then in this case, we are talking about not only about creating new documentation for packages that doesn't have, but also to update the ones, because in some cases there are some documentation pages that are not updated and some things have changed a little bit. And because they are very small details, like options in a command that doesn't exist anymore, or that have been added, or this. That's a little bit tricky. That would be maintaining a documentation package. That would be that. Yeah. So that's
Yep,
required also.
and this is also part of that burden that the maintainers usually pick up when they're upgrading packages for a new distro. Is if there's changes, you need to make sure the documentation is up to date. So there's always a ton of work to do on documentation. We're always working to improve it, and we always love contributions. Part of what we do is on the core team is make sure that documentation is as easy as possible to generate. We run the documentation service online that will auto-generate your documentation from your code API, as well as render it up on the website and allow people to mirror it and download it so that you can have easy access to as much documentation as possible.
Okay. Okay. So finishing about the line of calling the listeners for support, for help, for providing their effort into making ROS bigger and better. Let's change the subject. And what about now about the development of Gazebo? Gazebo, the simulator that is attached to the ROS version, to a ROS distro. Come on, I hope that by the end of the podcast I will already learn to say distro instead of version. So, let me go back. It's about what about the development of Gazebo? So, are you also coordinating that development, or there is a different team?
So there's a separate team here at Open Robotics coordinating Gazebo development. The project is quite distinct, but the team and the people will flow between them depending on what active projects are going on. People will work on either ROS or Gazebo. Often there are people that are working on both part-time. Depends on what needs of the projects are and who's best matches.
Uh-huh.
You were asking about the version of Gazebo that we integrate with ROS.
Yes.
We will typically. So early on, we actually bundled Gazebo into ROS packages and released it in the ROS pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
But Gazebo has now been contributed upstream. It's in Debian and Ubuntu. And so we just use whatever version is on the targeted platform for which ROS is targeted. So on Ubuntu Bionic, we're using the version that's bundled in Ubuntu.
Uh-huh. Okay, but I see here a problem, and is that the Gazebo, when it's released as a Debian, it is released as a standalone software that is not attached to ROS. So in order to be able to be used with ROS, you need to have the plugins, so the ROS packages for Gazebo. So how do you handle that? Because if Gazebo doesn't know about the next ROS version, and the next ROS version is waiting for the new Gazebo version to be released on the Debian. So how does it work, this communication?
Well, so the plugins are ROS distro specific.
Yes.
But they know, and the plugins are also written in a way that they know they can handle, they have if-defs or whatever necessary to be able to handle multiple versions of Gazebo. And so if there's Gazebo, like there's one version of Gazebo in Bionic and a different one in Cosmic, if we're targeting both those platforms, the ROS packages will make sure that they're compatible with both Bionic and Cosmic. And one of the important things is that the Gazebo team works hard to make sure that we have stability across the different releases. So there's a tick-tock cycle. So there are APIs that you can use that are compatible across the neighboring versions, so that you don't have to worry about necessarily if-defing. You can just make sure to use the right version of the API call so that you can work against multiple versions of Gazebo.
Okay. And another difficult question, let's say. So what is going to happen with Python 3? So I mean, ROS is based on Python 2, but Python 3 is becoming the standard now. And but in order to play with Python 3 with current versions of ROS, that's a little bit tricky. So how is ROS going to handle Python 3 in the next releases?
So the next release, I believe we're going to target Python 3 because the Python 2 countdown clock is going to be hitting 0 very soon.
Yeah.
several releases ago, we actually made a large effort and we made sure that all of the core of ROS is actually Python 2 and Python 3 compatible. There's a wiki page which actually tells you these are the simple formula for how to make sure that your code is both Python 2 and Python 3 compatible. And we highly recommend that everybody doing Python development follow those guidelines so that when we come up to needing to make Python 3 the default, it will be able to, it shouldn't matter to your program because you're already 2 and 3 compatible. And once we've made that switch, we can start eliminating the compatibility elements and just write Python 3. But for now, and it has been for years, our recommendation is to write 2 and 3 compatible code because we do already have people using Python 3 by default on different platforms such as Gentoo and Arch. I forget which one. One of those has Python 3 by default. And so they've been testing this all along. So there's a large part of the ecosystem that is already tested using Python 3.
Okay. So then for the next one, you must know, listeners of the podcast, that it's going to be officially in Python 3, the next distro of ROS. That it's called, what's the name of the next one?
Noetic Ninjamies.
Okay. Noetic.
Yep.
But that's
Noetic
really funny. Okay, so that's a question that I didn't have here in my list of questions, but now that they mentioned, so you have to explain, please, to the listeners, why are you putting those names of turtles to the ROS distros, and how do you choose the names?
Okay, well, this is a bit of a long story. Just for choosing the names, decision comes down to the release manager. We pick the release manager before the process, and they're part of their checklist for starting a release is to pick a name.
The ROS boss, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
The ROS boss is the one of super cool job. Yeah, I want to be the ROS boss.
Yeah, this is the best part of the best part of the job is being able to pick the name, I think. But we put it out for community suggestions. We take that input in, we review it for things like search engine optimization, trademark conflicts. There's all sorts of considerations, whether it's pronounceable, whether it has meanings in other languages. There's a lot of things that we take in. There's no hard and fast rules about what the names are. We do have a turtle theme, but we've had things like Indigo Igloo, which is not a turtle. But it sounds cool. So,
okay. And what? But why turtles?
So I believe Box Turtle was picked before we had a theme. But we liked the turtle because it has a lot of creation myths and turtles all the way down. And as we were getting ready for the release that became known as Sea Turtle, one of the things that we were working on is that we realized that we had our full robotic simulators, but we actually needed a simplified simulator to teach people ROS in the tutorials. That's even simpler than our simplest robot. And from that, Turtle Sim was born because a bunch of us grew up and used Logo.
Yeah.
And we remembered that Logo, the little cursor in Logo, is called a turtle.
Yes.
I got a connection interrupted.
Yes, we got it back. So sorry, listeners, we got a problem in the connection while Tully was explaining us about the cursor in Logo. It's called a turtle.
Yep. So the turtle, the cursor in Logo is called a turtle, and so we made a little baby box turtle logo and put it in instead of the little triangle. And so now you can drive the turtle around inside of Turtle Sim. And from that, we ended up picking Sea Turtle, which is a pun because it's pronounced like sea turtle, like the ones that swim through the sea, but it's spelled with a C because C comes after B.
Yeah, exactly. What's the next distro?
And so the connections to the educational robots dating back to the 1940s, and then having this theme. If you look closely inside of Turtle Sim, you'll find out that in every new release, in every time you start it, you get a random turtle, and in every new release, we add one more turtle to the rotation, which is themed on the name of the distro.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Okay, so we got the story of the names of the distros here on the podcast. That's amazing. That's very cool, very cool. And and about to finish, but a couple of questions more. It's so what are the plans for the future of ROS One? Because having ROS Two being developed also so fast, and people making transitions of many things from ROS One to ROS Two. What is the future that you have planned for ROS One?
So we're going to make Open Robotics is planning to make one more release of the ROS One Noetic and Gemes, and this is going to come out next spring on the Ubuntu LTS. Our target is this will be an LTS release with a 5-year support cycle, which is will take its support all the way out to 2025. And in the meantime, ROS 2 is going to be developing rapidly, and we're looking to have all the features that everyone needs from ROS 1 in ROS 2 well before the end of the ROS 1 EOL, so that we can everyone can make the transition with us to ROS 2.
Okay, so what you just said right now is that there is going to be only one single more ROS 1 distro being released. That's what I understood. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. So,
but for a sense of scale, ROS is just over 10 years long. ROS has been around for just over 10 years, and we're still looking at 5 years of support from next year.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's actually already a 50% increase in the current lifespan of ROS. It'll take it over 15 years of support.
Oh yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. But I was thinking more on the sentimental part. So many years developing that, and now it's like the baby that gets out of home already. So it gets all. It becomes an adult, and then it has to leave the home. It's a little bit sad. And what are you going to do then if ROS One is only remains one distro? Then what is going to be your job then?
Well, all the stuff that we're doing for ROS 1, we're doing for ROS 2 as well.
Okay, so you're going to join the team of Dirk then?
I mean, it's the same team here. Dirk is the technical lead for ROS 2. He's helping make this all happen. So we're...
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to make a very bad joke, but it was very, very bad. So don't worry, don't worry. Okay, very good. So happy. Okay, so then final question: are you going to attend to the ROSCon in Macau?
Definitely, I'm looking forward to it. We're getting geared up for this. We've got plans for this will be the biggest one yet. And it'll be a great opportunity. If anyone's interested, I highly encourage you to come out and join us there. Meet others in the community, find collaborators, and see what everyone else in the community is doing.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll meet you there. Okay, so
sounds great.
Like all the other years, also. Okay, thank you very much, Tully. It's been an honor to have you here on the podcast and to talk and to learn so much from you. Thank you very much, Tully.
Thank you for having me.
And for all the listeners, let me tell you that so there is we have talked with Tully about the ROSCon that is going to be on Macau, and it's the official ROS conference that every ROS expert or everyone willing to learn ROS and willing to be developing ROS has to attend. Okay, because you are going to meet there all the important people from ROS, very, very interesting conferences, very good ambient, and so you are going to enjoy a lot. And also you will be able to meet Tully there. And but on the other side, on our company at the Construct, we have launched also the second edition of the ROS Developers Conference. And we want to make a different conference in order to provide something different for the developers, that it's an online conference that is a hands-on conference. What does it mean? It means that you will not have to attend, just to attend and listen, but also to practice at the same time as the speaker. It is an online conference and you don't have to travel. You only need to have a computer with a web browser and then connect to the conference and start programming in ROS with the speakers. So you can check all the details at the web address that is called rosdevcon.com. And I will put a link to both conferences beneath the podcast on the notes. You can see there. And that is all for today. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next week with a new lessons from the expert. But until then, keep pushing your ROS learning, guys. We have to learn a lot. See you.
The ROS Developers Podcast, the ROS Developers.